Hey guys, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm extremely excited to be joined by the man, the myth, the legend, the tennis nerd, Jonas. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We told before we started, I told you I've been sick for like a week, but now I'm getting out of it back on the court, so in better spirits. But yeah, it's this time of year, everyone's sick. It's annoying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can relate. I can relate for sure. Here in the UK, it's freezing cold, so I'm hoping I can not catch anything. In terms of then, you're saying that you're not been playing too much, but you've built an incredible platform. Not just on YouTube, but your website and across really the tennis world now. How did you get into tennis, and like how did you build it? Just out of interest for people, for the couple of people that are watching or listening that might not know much about you.
Yeah, so I started playing tennis when I was a kid. I was like really addicted to tennis, like watching tennis, playing tennis. I don't think I had maybe the best coaching experience, or the in my hometown there wasn't a lot of opportunities to get like a serious coach and stuff like that at the time. So I quit for other sports relatively early. I started playing football. I played chess. Like I was a chess player for a long time. Played national world championships, national team stuff as a junior. But also football, table tennis, all kinds of sports. As most kids do when you grow up. I think it's a good strategy. And then I started getting back into tennis when I was like 20 something, 20, 21, which is quite late. But when you start later, you usually have a stronger passion. You remember like, oh, I used to love this game. I used to love playing tennis. I used to always watch like all the icons and the grand slams when I was a kid, and so I really like fell more and more in love with it the more I played from that on. And I started writing about it as well on Tennisnerd. So I got the website set up maybe like 13 years ago or something crazy. So it's an old ass website, and it's been around. But I've been just tinkering with it for a long time, and I started testing rackets, getting into the racket jungle, which is where I've been for most of my late tennis life, and started trading rackets with friends and buying, selling, trading. That's how you get started testing. Like you're not getting demos from the racket companies early on, so you have to start testing. And I started getting down the string rabbit hole, learn how to string, and et cetera, et cetera. And then I found out like over time that there are other people who like this gear stuff. There are other people who like to tinker with their equipment, and I got to know a lot of them online. And you started sharing information, started learning more and more. And after a while, I realized, okay, this is something I can actually keep working on, and it's quite a fun hobby. And now since a few years I'm doing it full time. So I'm doing the website, YouTube channel. I mean, YouTube came later, as in 2018, 19 I started doing YouTube, and that also picked up steam relatively quickly. But it's not like a huge channel of any kind, but it's doing pretty well, and people seem to like the content. So yeah, it's a little bit of a surprise to me still. I still suffer from that feeling of like, what am I doing with my life, but I also love it. So it's a really fun, and it's a blessing to be part of tennis, because it's a great sport.
Yeah, 100%. It's great to be able to do what you love, right? That's the goal, I think, for everyone in life. So it's amazing. And you're saying about trading rackets with your friends and getting a demo rackets. I'm actually in the process of finding potentially a new racket myself. I've been playing with a Pure Strike 2021 since 2021, and before that, the older version as well. But I've never tried out rackets, so I just went online, looked what looks like a particularly good racket. Okay, what's the ratings generally? But never found a racket that was maybe tailored to my specific game. If you were to have some advice, like for people who want to try and find the best racket for them, like what are the most important factors do you think? Like initially, what the kind of the categories they should look out for, they should really bear in mind when they on that journey?
Yeah, if you're looking for a new racket today, if you go back maybe 15 years, the quality of some rackets were not that great. Like quality control in terms of weight balance, swing weight, these things. And also like there could be some real bad rackets, like they're just stiff, not really doing much, just like not a well-engineered racket. In 2025, where we've had like loads of rackets, I've had my busiest racket testing season now, the last 2 months. Every manufacturer under the sun has released a new racket. So it's been very busy, but they've all been quite good. So it's difficult in a way to choose, but it's also like when you choose something, you don't have to think about the racket being like a bad racket, or that it's not going to be used by advanced players or whatever, because these rackets are all good rackets. The thing you have to hopefully you can is demo, right? Like I think it's always very important to try the racket for yourself, because it's such a personal thing. You might be like, but I don't like this, but even if it gets rave reviews, you might not like that feel. You might be connected to something from your past, like your muscle memory is stuck to a certain racket, makes it very difficult to let go. The pros never changed really. Like they usually stay with the racket for most of their career, maybe tweak a bit. Maybe they do a late change, like Roger, for example. He did make a switch towards the later stages of his career. And I think the demo is very important. There's so much information online, but you can get lost in the information as well. But you can watch different review channels, see like, okay, these rackets are highly reviewed, and for what kind of my style. I like control, so I like a blade, or like the Pure Strike you mentioned. I like these type of rackets. Maybe I can get like my hands on a few of those. There are a few manufacturers, or there are a few like retailers that have demo programs. So like Tennis Warehouse Europe, but others as well. And you can maybe go to your local club, like get a few rackets and try them and see. And if it doesn't feel right after the 30 minutes, I would say it's not going to be for you. That's generally it. Like you have to think about the string in the racket as well, because string is half the racket. That makes it even more complex, sadly. But usually it should feel good. Like it should feel like, okay, I can vibe with this one. If you don't have that feeling, it's like going on a date. If it doesn't feel good in the beginning, you're like, it's not gonna be for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was actually going to ask you about how long it takes you to kind of feel whether you like a racket or not in your personal experience. But you're saying 30 minutes, which makes sense. I think I've been demoing a lot of rackets, and I tend to get the same, I think, feeling, I think, after maybe 30 minutes. And sometimes I'll play another session with it, another couple of sets, but it just doesn't quite hit the same. On the string point, it's quite interesting, right? Because obviously anyone that's watched your content and generally tennis equipment content will know that, okay, well, different strings are not necessarily, like if there's a string that's very good for one racket, it might not necessarily be the perfect string for another racket, and vice versa. But for me, with someone who isn't able to try loads of different strings on every single racket, I've kind of gone for the same. I've Yonex Poly Tour Pro on pretty much most of the rackets, but obviously that's not the ideal for every racket. So how do people navigate through that in terms of knowing, okay, like what strings to use? And there's obviously there's a complexity to it, right? Like like if you were to say you've got a control racket or a stiffer racket, do you go for a softer string or a tougher string? What's the kind of your thoughts on that? Like how do you navigate through that?
Yeah, you can have a few rules. Like it's also complicated because some people like a board. So if you want to create like a board like feel in your tennis rackets, you have a dense pattern racket like a Blade 98 1820, and then you put a stiff string, Luxulum 4G. And then you get like to Stefanos racket setup, and I have dealt with Stefanos a little bit the last year with rackets and stuff. And yeah, he likes the board. Like he doesn't like when you add like a gut, or we try different hybrids and stuff like this. He doesn't really like it. And that's, up to him. So he has a preference, right? I'm sorry. I have my cold still on, so you have to edit away some stuff. So that's one example, like a player likes a board. But overall, if you're a intermediate player or intermediate to advanced, you might want to mitigate some of that stiffness from that dense string bed with a softer string. Or if you're playing with a stiffer string, like Olu Power, Luxulum 4G, RPM Blast, these popular strings that are quite firm, reduce the tension. Be open to going down, to below 50 pounds. Don't stay up in this 55-pound region, because that creates a really stiff sensation and can lead to arm issues. And also, you're not getting like the use of the polyester string is not maximized, because it's like the sweet spot is going to be very small, and it's going to be like a very low powered experience. So unless you're like you can really generate loads of power, I don't think that makes a lot of sense to use. So I would definitely go down like in that type of racket 45 pounds. But if you then go the other side and you're playing with like a super powerful racket, like a pure drive, you might need more control. So you might need like if you have a softer polyester, you might need it to be 55 pounds, 53 pounds. And if you have a stiffer polyester, at least like 51, 52. So it has to be a bit paired with the racket in a good way. And that makes it tricky because you might find a racket you like, and then the next step for your journey is to find the string and the tension. And string and tension, it's also a jungle, right? Like, so unless you have a string you really like, which is usually the easiest transition, you're like, okay, I'm always played Tour Bite, Solinco Tour Bite, so I'm always going to play with that. I always play 49 pounds. Okay, fair enough. Easier, you know, but if you add that complexity, it can be a bit tricky. But nowadays, at least you have the option to say, okay, I want to play with a polyester string, but you have stiff to very soft polyester, so you can actually, at least depending on your racket and what kind of control you're looking for, dial it in depending on the stiffness of the string.
Yeah, no, I agree. The string, the string factor is very interesting because I actually tried. I played with RPM Blast like for years and years and years, and then eventually I was like, I felt like my arm was going to fall off. I think I was playing with that like 55 pounds, and the way that I play, like I'm kind of at my level anyway, like big serving, big forehand, like quite. There's a lot of kind of snaps, so eventually I felt like, I'm starting to feel a bit older. I've got kids, I don't get as much sleep. My arms are feeling creaky. So I then dropped the tension quite low actually to 40 pounds. I just thought I'm going to try it and see how it is. And it actually felt quite nice. And then I changed the string, went to Alu Power, tried that at 40 pounds, but obviously the durability is not quite there. So after a while, it kind of it becomes dead. But it was an interesting experience with that as well. What would you say in terms of like some of the softer strings, right? People can go for like multi filaments and those types of strings as well. What's the upside and downside into potentially using those in one of the more powerful rackets?
Yeah, the upside is power and comfort. You're going to get loads of power, loads of comfort. It's going to be easy to use, like feels easy on the arm. You're not going to get a lot of control from the multi-filaments, right? So the issue is that they move and they don't move back into place. Like a polyester, it snaps back into place. So you talk about the snapback effect, like how quickly it just snaps back, and that's how you get a lot of like spin potential. I mean, you generate the spin with your strokes, but then sometimes the string helps you a bit to get extra. But the multifilament, if you have any tennis elbow issues or a history of that, I think generally it's a good choice until you feel fine. And that you can string higher, so you can string it at 55, 53 pounds, it's fine. While with a polyester, you really need to be kind of like a strong player or play a ultra powerful racket to string in that kind of range, because it's gonna be very stiff for you. But there's still a place for multifilaments. You can put them in a hybrid as well. So half of the string setup is multifilament. Put that in the mains, you're gonna get good power, and then you put like all the power or another polyester. There's so many, right, in the crosses, and you're getting a little bit of a mix of both worlds. You're getting a bit of a softer feel, but you still have some control. So that's quite a popular setup also among the pros. I mean, they use natural gut because they can afford it. It's a bit more expensive, holds tension better. So if you can afford a premium experience, like a natural gut hybrid is Rolls Royce of a string setup.
Yeah, it is. I just don't think I can afford that. but for the richer people out there, I think it's great. I definitely want to try it at some point because everyone talks about the natural gut hybrid, right? And I know obviously it's the ideal. You talked about Steph, right? You worked with him on testing out some setups, etc.
Yeah, I helped him like a little bit unofficially, right?
Okay.
But still, it's like it's interesting to get a. I've done it with other pros as well the last few years, and you get an interesting, like an insight into like his life, and
Yeah.
also the different pros, like they are more open to testing nowadays, and that's been a
Mm.
learning experience for me. Like if you go back maybe 10 years, they were a little bit more like, okay, I'm stuck with this. But now the younger generation, they're more like, okay, I need more power now. The balls are bad. There's a big discussion about the quality control of the balls being using less good rubber since COVID due to manufacturing issues and stuff like that. And yeah, pretty much all the players I talk to, like they complain about the balls in some way. So they
Mm.
want a bit more from the racket, less strain on the elbow, because also the pros, they get obviously overuse injuries on their elbow. They don't have like bad technique, but they get overuse. They put a lot of strain on their arm. That's interesting to see that the pros are also open, like testing different strings, testing different tensions. We had Medvedev now in Qatar here, I think, and he's playing with different setups. He's testing in the match, depending on who's playing or how the conditions feel. He has actually a few different setups, not only the tensions, because that used to be standard. Like, okay, I bring a lower tension in case it's quite like cold and I need more power, and if it's very humid and warm, then I need a higher tension to have more control. But he's also bringing different weights and balances, right? So
and strings, right? Because I think I saw that. I think it was with you and Technofiber and the tech. Well, I guess the equipment expert was essentially saying to you that it's a one-off for him, but he has like different string setups for like in it for a match. So it's really interesting. He's trying out different things, but it's great to see that the players are open to that, right? Because especially someone like Medvedev, who's not maybe playing his best right now, he's open to saying, "Well, let me tinker and see what I can do." And I feel like he's always been that way. I spoke to him at Wimbledon when I went as media, and he seems very open to even just not just evolving his setup and obviously his equipment, but also generally his game as well, which is very interesting to see. He's not just set in his ways. On Steph though, do you have? Obviously, he was unofficial, but do you have like an insight into like what his current setup is now at the moment?
Yeah. He's using a Blade 98 1820 Pro stock, from a bunch of years back, and he uses Luxlum 4G, and he uses that at 23 kilos and 22 kilos in the crosses. So he went down a bit after his elbow. That was something we discussed, of course, and that's in pounds, that's 51 and 49, which is kind of what I use as well. Like I my tension go to his 51 mains and 49 crosses. I like that, not going all the way up to like the Alcaraz territory, which is 55, 51, but he hits the ball like a crazy person. So, but yeah, that's Steph's setup. I think he doesn't really want to tweak so much. I mean, he tried everything for a while, but I think now he's hitting the ball well, but yeah, he is struggling to, like Medvedev, to get W's on the board. I mean, he got a few in Rotterdam. I was there actually, and but yeah, it's tricky for these guys now, kind of stuck in the middle generation to I guess get over the fact that these guys are so good, like Alcaraz and Sinner, and then you have Fonseca coming as well. So it's a tough one out there now.
Yeah, they've got the scar tissue as well, right, from the big three, and then also
Yeah.
now the next gen coming through. So they thought it was going to be their time now, and it doesn't quite seem that way, unfortunately. If you were to you advising Steph, right? So if you put your Tennisnerd hat on, which I'm sure you've always got, what would you say would be the ideal setup from your perspective for him to give him what he needs in terms of his game? His big serving forehand, comes to the net a lot, transitions. What would you say is maybe off the top of your head, like an ideal setup that might work for him the best?
Yeah, I mean, I think for him it would be better to have a little bit of a stiffer, slightly more forgiving frame, right? Like, so we talked about the RF Pro, the new RF, having a little bit more of elliptical beam, helps a bit of a stiffness on the one-handed backhand, because that I think he can shank a little bit sometimes. I mean, he needs a little bit more forgiveness, I think would be good for him. So a stiffer frame with a bit more of a modern beam design. So the RF Pro I thought would be interesting for him to try. I don't know if he's tried it yet, to be honest, but he needs to stay within Wilson, so you can't really suggest whatever, if you're sponsored. But outside Wilson, I would think like an ISO 98 or something, just getting that a little bit more, staying within 98, because it's such a tough thing for a pro to go up in head size. That's tricky. I mean, Roger had to do it from 90 to 97 because he was playing such a like an old school racket. But if you're in the 98 range, I don't see that you're going to go up to 100. I don't see that for him quite. But he could also try, another thing I've suggested is to try the Alex de Minaur setup, which is the Steam 99 he's using with a 16-19 string pattern. So he has an extra string. Usually the Steam 99 is 16-18, but they have the Pro Stock version with the 16-19 for de Minaur. And that seems to work really well for him. And it's also a firmer racket with a little bit more forgiveness. So, sorry, that's what I feel like could work for him. But then it's like you can have many ideas, and then when you see what works on court, and it's all in the head and it's all in the hand, right? So it's really up to the player, and sometimes it could be the right solution over a long time or period of time, but you need like half a year to sacrifice results, and that is very, very tricky for players to do. Like if they play like 2 tournaments and things go not so well, they just want to go back to their old setup, even though it might be right to persist. And I mean, when Roger switched, it took him quite a while and some lukewarm results for him to stay, but it was the right choice. And in the end, he won 3 more slams. So I think it's a tricky one to navigate for the pros, but sometimes they need to persist with it.
Yeah, short term pain for long term gain, right?
Yeah,
That's what it is.
yeah,
And they say that when you do coaching as well, right? With a tennis coach, they'll say they break down your technique and they'll say, well, okay, you might need to go through a bit of pain for a couple of months, but longer term it's going to help you. But at the pro level, they're so good, they probably think, if I just go back, it'll be fine. But yeah, it's interesting. On the strings for him, you said he has polyester, right? In the crosses and the mains.
yeah,
So
4G, yeah.
so I'm assuming he's tried natural gut, but it's interesting because I would have thought for someone like him, who it seems like feel is could be quite a big part of his game. But are you surprised by that? Like, what would you recommend for a string setup?
Yeah, I mean, we did try all like we all tried gut, mains, crosses. We tried all the power, or he tried it, but yeah, and he didn't. If the sensation, he doesn't like the sensation of the gut. He doesn't feel confident. He had a period where he brought like 7 different rackets, and there were like 4 different string setups in them for testing and training and stuff. And yeah, it's tricky if you don't like the feel, but not in your head. Like if you look at most players being open to try for like the gut, especially 4G is one of the stiffest strings on the market, maybe the stiffest string, right? It's an intensely stiff string, and you put it in a dense string bed, it's gonna be a stiff, but it's gonna be a board, like I said before. So it makes all the sense in the world to put gut there. But if you don't like it, I don't know what to tell you. But like, for example, Deminar uses 4G in gut, works for him. He's playing the best tennis of his life, right? That's obviously not to do only with the racket, but it seems like a setup that makes sense. You also from a technical point of view.
It gives you the best of both worlds in a way, right? I guess
Yeah,
at that level, with the softness and the hardness of the of the 4G. On you talked about pro stock rackets, right? The pro
yeah.
stock Steam. So there's a lot of noise, I think, around what pro stock actually means, and what the benefit is from just recreational players using, etc. as well. Could you give a bit of insight into like what it actually means and whether there is any benefit from people actually buying pro stock rackets?
I don't think there's any point to buying pro stock rackets. Actually, I mean, like pro stocks generally are, older versions for the pros, or they could be if they want like an extra cross string or a different string pattern, slightly different stiffness. For most recreational players, this makes no sense because you have all the choice anyway in the market, right? So, and the rackets are good as they are. It's not like a pro stock has always much better feel or always this. It's like some magic involved in it. I wouldn't say that. The benefit of buying, if you're like really into your tennis and you want like maximum the reach the top of the equipment pile, right? Like then you can get it to have matched rackets. So let's say you buy 3 pro stocks and they're already matched, so the pros, they get like so-called hairpins. They're all like spot on in grams, weight, and balance. And when you buy rackets, they're not spot on weight and grams and balance. Like that's the issue for consumers. So we're buying 3 rackets and 3 arrows, for example, and then we're like, okay, we put them on the scale and we say like, oh, there's 5 grams difference, 3 grams difference, balance is different. And that can be frustrating because you want them to all be the same, and that's like they cannot really from the factory promise you that. It's like, it's just I mean, tennis rackets are handmade. There's extra resin somewhere. It's like a tricky process to make them all exact. So you need like a customizer, or you need a machine to be able to identify for you how to customize them. So that would be the main thing of pro stocks. But overall, there's no magic in pro stocks. They're quite expensive, and it's mainly like to get something that's not available on the market. But I think most amateur players will be happy with just buying a good normal racket.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an interesting one because everyone. I think there was a period of time, maybe a few years back, where pro stock was really big, and people were talking about, let's get pro stock rackets and we should test them. But I feel like maybe if you're not at that anywhere near that level, it's probably not beneficial, for sure. Like there's no real reason to have it. You're talking about the mains and crosses that Steph has different tensions in the mains
Yep.
and crosses, and also you do yourself.
Yep.
Could you explain like what's the benefit and like any potential drawbacks into having that? Why do people do that?
Yeah, so the reason is generally that the crosses are obviously shorter, right? So from like a scientific point of view, it makes sense that if you want like a similar feeling in the string bed, like the shorter strings should have a lower tension. If you look at it like from that point of view, but why the pros do it and a little bit why I do it is because you want, if you have a very like the same tension on the cross, there's a higher chance of like them locking in the main string. So you want the main strings to move. The main strings move when you hit the ball. I mean, all the strings move, but the main strings move the most, right? So they go out, they bend out, and they snap back, right? And you want to help them do that easier. So that's why you lower this tension, so it's not like grabbing that string as much. I mean, it's a very small. I mean, tennis is all about minor margins, right? Like it's all very, very minute margins, but it does make a difference. And like I've trying now maybe to go even 2 kilos difference, or at least 1.5. So now I'm 21.5. If we talk kilos, that's 51 and 48 pounds. And Alcaraz has 2 kilos differential. Grigor Dimitrov, 2 kilos differential. And it does make a difference. You do feel like you're getting a little bit more spin without losing control. Like you're getting a little bit more pop on the ball. So it makes sense. I mean, not everyone cares about it, but I feel like it has some point to it. Considering also that the strings are of different length in the racket.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try that out. And I'll revert back and tell
Yeah,
you
yeah.
what
Please
my
do.
findings are. No, it's really interesting. And I've seen it for quite some time, and I just was thinking, okay, like it's an interesting thing to try out, and it makes sense now when you break it down like that for sure. You were saying that you're trying out lots of different rackets this year. There's been loads of different releases: the E Zone, Pure Drive, Wilson Clash, just to name a few. I'm sure. Gravity, of course, as well, to name a few. What's been the racket that maybe has surprised you the most in a positive way from this year?
That's a tricky one. They're all pretty good, so it's also sometimes difficult to do so many rackets. Like it's kind of stressful. It sounds silly, but like you have to test them. I always want to give the rackets time, right? Like to really feel what they bring to the table and try different string setups and so on. I think the biggest like impact has the T Fight, like the Technifiber T Fight, because that's a smaller brand. Still, it's tough to get in among the big ones, the Head, Wilson, Yonex, Babola. Those are the four big dragons of tennis, yeah. And Technifiber really knocked it out of the park with the new T-Fight rackets, and then they were like they fixed the small things that were wrong with the previous version, and now everyone seems to love them. They're getting rave reviews, so I think they had like a really strong impact. And it surprised me that people are so in love with them. Like, I mean, I like them. I find them quite good, but they really had like a quite significant fan base already. So those are rackets you should try if you haven't never played a Technifiber racket, which I think there are many out there who haven't, right? I think they're very, very good rackets. But overall, like, there's not too much to be surprised about. Like, a lot of things are quite I would say like they logical in the racket world. Like, okay, they make subtle improvements for you every version. Yeah. So the Pure Drive, the previous version was quite stiff. So to help people's arms a bit and make the feel a bit more pleasant, they added the natural fibers that they already added in the Pure Aero version. So they kind of use the same technology all across the board of their different silos that they have, racket silos. So they made it softer, and now it's better in my opinion. Like, I think they needed to be softer, and now it is softer. So this is for me the best Pure Drive maybe ever. Like it's a very good Pure Drive. With the E Zone, they did interesting things. They wanted to make the 98 and the 100 further apart because they were quite similar, even though they were different head sizes. So they made the E Zone 100 stiffer. So it's a little bit more metallic or like a bit stiffer, like you get even more power. In my opinion, too much power maybe. While they made the ESO 98 softer, so you have a little bit less power, but it's nicer feel. It stays longer in the string bed, and I think the ESO 98 is one of those like rackets that really stand out. Like people love that racket. So the T fights and the ESO 98s, and even the Pure Drive 100 has been like all rackets that I've been like a big fan of.
Yeah, they're on my list to demo soon. The T fight, I've seen so many great reviews on it, including yours as well. But it's just not as readily available around here for some reason. But I need to try and find one and test that because I've never tried a Technofiber racket actually. So it's definitely on my list to try, and it seems like it's something a little bit different as well, which is great because as you said, it's a smaller brand in comparison to as you said, the 4 or 5 dragons that are maybe monopolizing the market as well, which is definitely interesting. Has there been a racket? I'm assuming because you're saying it's small tinkers, but has there been a racket that's maybe let you down a little bit this year?
It's a good question. I, I'm always a little bit like, I wouldn't say disappointed, but like Head, they make very minor changes. So sometimes it's not like the rackets are bad, but it's just like it's not enough of a change, like that's for a tester, that is a little bit boring, and that although they had a new model this year, Gravity Tour 98, which is very interesting and was a good stick. The other models in the Gravity lineup, for example, where they're good, but it's just not enough happening, right? So for a test, they're pretty boring. I struggled with the Whiteout 98 version 2 feel. Like I felt like that was a bit too dampened, right? Like it went a bit too muted for me. I prefer to really feel the ball, which is like what the T-Fight does well. Like you really feel the ball. There's not like so much going on. And that one felt like it was just they tried to make it so much more comfortable that it maybe took away a bit of that connection you have to the ball. I mean, there are many other reviewers that love it, so it's just a personal take that was a little bit disappointing.
Too dampened a little bit then for you.
Yeah. I liked when, if I don't know exactly where the ball is going, doesn't matter if it's a power racket or like, I don't like it. I don't enjoy that. That's something you look for maybe as a tester, especially like you want to feel connected to the racket, right? Like you're testing everything, you can compare with everything. So that's the thing that irks me usually.
Yeah, no, I'm the same actually. So I actually had that feeling with I tried the Head Radical MP 2023, and almost felt like sometimes when normally I'd feel like the ball would be going out, it kind of dropped in, which obviously sounds like a weird thing to complain about, but it was just I didn't quite know. Like normally when you play, right, okay, once you've hit a shot, you can kind of tell whether it's going to go in or out.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I'd say 98% of the time. But with that, I couldn't quite gauge like where the difference was, which is a bit weird. But yeah, I'm the same. I actually tried a Pro Staff recently, and I actually like that, but I don't know whether I'm good enough to play with it. 97 scoring chair Pro Staff, so I might try out the 100. The 100 and see
Those
how
are good though. The pure the Pro Staffs are good, and I think coming from the Pure Strike, that's not such a crazy change. And I think like going to the T fights is also like a quite logical change for you, because that has like a similar power level to the Pure Strike, a little bit more pleasant feel, I would say. So could be a good switch up depending on what you want. If you want more forgiveness, like 100, then there are other options.
No, yeah, I think I'm not a pro, obviously, but going up to 100, I've tried some of the hundreds and they're okay. Like, I'm with my serve, it feels great, but the rest of it just feels like I'm hitting with a frying pan at times. So I don't know why,
Yeah.
but it just doesn't feel right. And I think it's because I play with a 98 square inch head for so long. So it it doesn't feel the same. So I've had to kind of almost say maybe not, but I'll still try them out. But I kind of in my head, I know it's probably not right for me. What's your setup actually? Because you discussed obviously your tensions, but what are you currently playing with, Jonas?
Playing with everything, I usually say. But no, I mean, I'm flirting a bit with the new Technifiber T500. It's called 300, but it's 100 square inch. But it's a bit like me. I prefer 98s as well, like you. I've always been preferring smaller head sizes. So I always try to get more help from the racket because scientifically, technically, that's what you should be doing. Like, how can I get more power while still controlling the ball? But the Aero 98 is what I've been using now the last few months or half year, whatever. And I'm testing strings in them right now to see which string. I usually like a firmer string in that one, but then I string it like 23, 22, like I said. So The Aero 98 just has this addictive spin to it. Like it generates like a really difficult ball for the opponent. So I do notice, like if I'm playing with some of my regular hitting partners, I feel like if I'm playing with another racket, I'm giving them less headaches, right? So they need like if I play with a more of a flat trajectory, I'm more easily a target for them. So this is what's kind of addictive with the Pure Aero 98. It's a good stick.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I agree because when I've been demoing rackets, I would give my own scores, do my scores, and say, okay, this is what I think it is, and then after a few goes, update it, and then I was thinking to myself, I should probably ask the person I'm playing with, like, how does it feel? Because I normally play with the same person in the demo rackets, and I was saying, like, how does my ball actually feel? And then that gives like a really good perspective. And I know actually when you've done some of your testing videos, you've done the same because sometimes you think you've hit a really heavy ball and actually it doesn't have the same effect on the opponent in comparison to maybe you feel like it's not as heavy, but actually it has been because obviously you only get the connected feeling when you make contact, right? But you don't get to feel what it actually is like on the opponent's racket, which is really interesting as well from that perspective. But what kind of weight are you playing? I'm assuming I'm assuming you've customized it. Have you customized your Pure or have you?
Uh, Not that much actually. I try to not customize and get too much down that rabbit hole. Because these rackets need to be whippy. You need to swing them fast. So if you add too much weight to them, suddenly you lose the whole like DNA of the frame, right? So I add. It's a tricky situation because I like a 2.5 grip, and on bubble out rackets they are a little bit different, the different brands, right? But so I add two over grips on top of the regular grip. Creates a bit more of a rounded feel, but I'm okay with it. But I would ideally maybe add like this shrink sleeve, like that bumps up the grip to half a size. That would be good. So that's what I'm doing. And to match them, because I had one that was heavier, that was like had more weight in the head. So I have a Metro Tune machine, which is great. Like I get all the data sent from the rackets to the computer. The computer will tell me how to match them. So it would say like, oh, you can put lead there, there, there. It's an amazing piece of machinery,
Amazing.
I add a bit of weight at around 12 o'clock on the rackets to match them, but they're not too heavy. You know, they're kind of in the Alcaraz territory, although I'm very very far from Alcaraz in many ways. But they're like he plays quite light, so they're not too far off his sticks.
Yeah, he was playing with almost a stock racket, right? Before
Yeah.
this year. I know he's added a little bit of weight. I think it's the throat. I mean, you can probably correct me, but
Oh,
I mean,
correct. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So he added a bit of, I think, 5 grams to the throat, which is an odd position to add weight. But it's like that's where you add weight to um, to make the racket just statically heavier without adjusting the swing weight, like how heavy the racket swings. And you could argue. I had this discussion with a friend of mine who's a customizer yesterday at dinner. Like, how much does throat weight change? It sounds like a boring discussion, but we didn't want to talk about that. But how much does it affect? And in his opinion, it doesn't affect that much. I agree. And it can also be like it makes the racket feel a little bit heavier because the weight is above your hand, right? So when you're swinging, like you will have the added throat weight is above your hand, so it can affect your swing a little bit, even though it's not much in swing weight. So it's a
yeah.
very technical discussion, but that's what he did, and it seems to work for him. So he just needed, I guess, more weight on the rackets. Like he wanted a bit more of a solid feel, and that might work for him.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thinking that I had when I saw. I mean, it seems weird, like where he's placed it, but I was thinking maybe it just makes him feel a bit more solid. I guess maybe out the corners defending potentially. Maybe he just felt like it was a bit flimsy a little bit sometimes through there. So that bit's interesting. Why do you think actually? Because you're talking about the fact that Alcaraz has had a lighter setup, and are a lot of players moving now to lighter setups? Because before it was the players were playing with really heavy rackets, right? They were going up to like 340, 350s, even above. But now it seems like players are actually almost playing close to the specs of the actual rackets nowadays, which is interesting. And then on top of that as well, they're potentially going for maybe bigger head size. We are talking about that and potentially more power oriented rackets. Like, why are we shifting towards that?
Yeah, game has changed quite a bit in just like a few years. I would say 5 to 10 years, maybe. There's still like the dinosaurs on the tour. You don't want to call them that, maybe, but like Djokovic, Wawrinka, Gasquet, these guys all play very heavy. And Murray, I mean, just retired, played very heavy. Like we talk about guys 360 grams, 370 grams, similar swing weight, 360, 370 swing weight, very heavy rackets, slower swings needed to play with this. You cannot swing it like Alcaraz style; it's impossible. But the game is speeding up, and the way they hit the ball, these young kids, like partly they grew up playing very light rackets. So, like if you look at the generation of Rublev, Medvedev, um, Zverev, these guys played, and then Shapovalov as well. They all played like a model called the Wilson 6195 at one point, and that's a 330-gram racket with a lot of weight in the handle. So they played heavy, but the weight was based in the handle, so they could actually swing it pretty fast anyway, but not crazy fast, but pretty fast. And they all played that model, and that affected their game quite a bit. Like that's like your racket when you are a junior will groove your game, and you see it in Alcaraz. Like the way his racket and the way he plays and his racket, like it works in kind of symbiosis, but it will also have some cons to it. Like it will pros and cons to everything, right? But the kids, they grow up, they played with arrows, they play with E-zones, they play with lighter rackets, most of them. And they obviously not going to start slapping loads and loads of weight on the racket because the game is just getting faster and faster. The players are hitting harder, they're moving better. Like to hit the winner these days is much more difficult, it seems like, than going back 10 years. So I think it's a pretty logical trend, that they need to swing so much faster and get so much more help from the racket now, and they're all looking for that extra. But if you go back, they were all like happy to just have the stability and control. So those are the main. Like you want to be controlling, but now they have put so much spin on the ball that control is becoming less of a focus point for them.
Yeah, which is interesting. Have the balls also been a factor, do you think, in that? You're talking about the ball quality and the balls maybe dying. Do you think that's why they want a bit more snap and like power in their setups?
Yeah, I think so. For most players, they discuss the balls. Like it's pretty clear. I think even if you're a club player and you played like before the pandemic and now, that the balls last like a shorter time. I
Yeah.
would say all brands. Some brands, they have their own factories. At least I think one or two. So, but many of them are reliant on the same factories, and rubber prices changed. Maybe they wanted to cut some costs. Also, the racket brands. And we've all paid a price for that because the balls just after 45 minutes in some cases, it's a dead ball, like it's gone. And I'm not hitting as hard as the guys on tour, so for them it's even crazier. And if you go down to the futures level, where they sometimes don't even change balls, even though it's like a 3-set match, because of the logistics and the financials of that side of the tennis tour, it becomes even more difficult to hit a winner. It's even more difficult to finish a point. So the balls for sure have a big impact, and I think they need to do something about that situation, because it also gets annoying for all tennis fans that like the pros revert to discussing about the balls, and that shouldn't be an issue. We shouldn't see this kind of discussions in a professional sport. I feel like it's a bit silly.
Yeah, it seems crazy to have it at the in professional top level sport to be discussing the equipment that the tournaments are providing. Like, surely it should just be, gold standard you'd expect. I guess there's one side of it which is there's a sponsor, and obviously the balls will play differently anyway, generally, potentially, which is I think one of the issues. Then also now it's to do with the quality of the actual balls as well, post COVID. So, what do you think the solution is? Like, what would be the ideal solution? Do they just have one manufacturer and then just slap the sponsors on each one for each tournament?
Yeah, I think that would be good if they could make a more stringent like rule on like what on the ball quality from ATP as well, to say, hey, this is the ball we require. Like this is the kind of gold standard ball, and if it doesn't add up, you're not, we cannot do a ball sponsorship for this tournament of some kind. I don't know like all the politics in ball sponsorships, but from what I heard, I think there's plans of having like a more standard ball on tour. And I mean, they could have it maybe quarterly. So this quarter we play with this ball, or in like during the clay season we play with this ball, because they already do it for the grass court season. So they all play with Schlesinger balls. That's the ball during the grass court season. There's no change in balls. So if they can do it for the grass, maybe they can do it for other parts of the season, like to just make sure that they have one standard ball at least for a chunk, and then maybe they change it up. I don't know, but it can't go on like this because it's a bit stupid.
Yeah, no, it's crazy to see and also I feel like there's players getting injured more because of it as well, right? Because the
Yeah.
ball's dying, etc. as well, and clearly it is also changing the game as well and the setups. And we'll talk about Alcaraz's setup and how light it is. Are there any players that you've seen recently or heard about recently where you're very surprised about their setup, whether it be the racket, the weight, the strings? Like it could even just be in the last few years, even.
No, not that. I don't think there's a super surprising thing. Like it's sometimes funny to me, like the guys like Cerundolo, the Argentinian like player who's quite a young guy. He plays like old school racket, like from the mold is 30 years old. It's a PT57A. It's one of those like magical pro stocks we talked about before, and he plays it super heavy. So he plays kind of like a Djokovic style racket, but he's a young guy who plays on clay and hits hard like it's that's a little bit counterintuitive. You think like the guys coming up would all play with this. And we have also Basavareddy, a strong American player coming up. He also plays with like old mold from 2012, this racket, slightly longer, which is quite rare as well, and very heavy swing weight. So he plays the Djokovic style game, plays with Djokovic style rackets. So there's still these young guys playing old school frames. But that's usually where I get a little bit surprised that they're still around. But it suits their game in most cases. So that's what they like.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to see someone like Surrender actually using that, and it's great to hear the insight onto what rackets they use. Like it's from like 30 years old racket. And where did he even find that, or even get advised about that? That's crazy because I mean, I don't even think he is 30. So the racket's probably older than him, which is crazy to think about. Like he's using that, but yeah, I wonder why he does use that. We were talking about like the 98 square inch and 100 square inch head sizes, and the fact that some of the pros is quite hard for them to go up, etc. as well. And we were saying our preference for 98. Have you found like with all the rackets that you've tested that there are some 100 square inch rackets where, or 98 square inch rackets, depending on the sweet spot? Because Yonex, for example, they're renowned for having a bigger sweet spot, say on the 98. Have you felt that there's been some similarity with some of the 98 to 100 square inch, depending on the shape of the head, the like sweet spot, etc.? Or is it when you test them, you test so many rackets now, okay, this is a 98 square inch head, this is a 100 square inch head. It's very, very easy to determine which is which, if that makes sense.
No, that's a good question. I have one very common example, like a recent example. Uh, sorry, it's a Dunlop SX line. So that's the spin line. It's like the aero line or the extreme line from head. And if you hold the rackets up, it's a 98 and 100. Like the old manufacturers seem to want to produce the 98 and 100. It's very hard to determine from hitting with them. It's very hard to determine even from the eye test what is a 98. Like they look so similar, and they play very similar as well. That was a tough one for me, and they're 98s today. Like I mentioned, the Air 98, which I love, that feels like it has the power and the spin of 100, but it's still a 98. And it's a 1620, which is quite dense pattern, but the ball still has a high launch angle. I don't know exactly like how they engineer that, but it's a really like high lift on the ball. So those lines are being blurred a little bit, I would say. And I noticed that when I usually bring like test rackets out for sessions, different players. And I've seen like these on 98, which I would usually hand to strong, like male players, mainly usually the WTA players don't want to use like 100 square inch head size. But I've had some strong women players, girl players, that they really like the 98 more than 100 because the feeling, and they feel like the 98 is still forgiving enough thanks to the isometric head shape, Yonex doing them. So there are some lines that are blurred in this case, and it's not always easy to estimate, like to just by based on the eye test, this is 100 or a 98. I play the T fight, like I prefer the 100 square inch over the 98s because it's a little bit more forgiving, and it's still not like feeling too large, so I can't just generate enough swing speed, or it feels clunky. It doesn't feel clunky. So I think that those margins are smaller than they maybe used to be a bit.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess it's to do with the fact as well that the head shapes are so different now for a lot of different rackets as well. So I feel
Yeah.
like obviously the distribution of the weights different, which is really interesting as well. Because yeah, it's I kind of found that as well that it's not always the same, which I guess might leave a little small margin for the like the Wilson Shift and Nordic Dots 99 square inch head sizes. But do you think there's a place for those in the market than the 99 square inch head? It's quite unique, right?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think it's easy to overvalue head size, right? Because like if you put like a 99 and a 100, they're so close. It's like it's a one square, and it's how they measured it. It's how the head shape is. You know, the Nordic Dots Model 99 is also kind of towards like isometric head shape, similar to a Yonex racket or like the head boom. So that shape obviously affects how the string bed interacts with the ball and so on. But yeah, there's definitely space for 99s. I think like the Steam 99, as I said, is great. The Model 99 from Nordic Dots was one of my favorite rackets of last year. And it's definitely like a space for that one. I think, most rackets seem to end up in this 98 to 100 um, category now. There's not like any 95s much anymore if you look at club level, which used to be a very common head size. And rackets are not getting much bigger either. So that's interesting. Like you're not seeing a lot of oversized or towards oversized rackets. It just seemed to be 98 to 100. That seems to be where like all from almost from beginner level, almost maybe like intermediate, lower level, up to pro. That's what you play. That's where the big massive rackets are. You're not playing 100, maybe 104. You can go up to for the Wilson one. The Blade 104 is pretty good, but overall, you're not seeing many rackets with the above 100 head size.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And on the string bed, you're talking about obviously it plays differently depending on the shape, etc. I've heard some people talk about string spacing. So, for example, there's a 16 by 19, just say 98 square inch head racket, and you compare it with another one with the same specs, but the string spacing is different because of where the strings are actually on the racket. How is that actually a thing? Does it make any difference? And how much of a difference does it actually make? And what is the difference, I guess?
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Like, so you can have, when you say 1619, there could be endless combinations of 1619. Like, you can make a 1619 that is quite open, and like the ball, really has a high launch angle, which is something some love, some don't. Or you can make a really dense 1619 where it's like, okay, in the middle, because the middle part of the racket, that's where you're going to hit the ball, hopefully, right? So, where a 1619 can also be ultra dense. So it's like, okay, this is very controlled, low launch angle. So when you're saying the string pattern, that's one piece of information. But unless you see the string pattern and you see the spacing of the strings and how they've spaced up and like plan the racket, then the 69 really doesn't say a lot. It says something, but it could still be dense, it could still be open. So that kind of information is very important. And how you drill gets a different, like, okay, if you have some like older rackets, I remember, like you could have like positions in the string bed where you have like a hotspot, where the ball just shoots out or something weird happens. It's not like evenly spaced, or it's not like there's something going on in the string bed where suddenly you get like an erratic response or a surprising. You don't want any surprises when you play tennis. You want the ball to go where you planned it to go. Like, that's generally it. So as soon as the string bed produces like some surprise, then it's not a good thing.
Okay, and I got you. So then, could you potentially have an 1820 that's more open in the in the string bed because of the spacing with a 1619 that's actually more dense? Could that be
Yeah,
possible?
you
Yeah.
could technically have that. Yeah, it depends on how you drill the holes. Like, there's been 1820s, like it's all depending also on the head size. I think it's tough to make a very open 95 square inch 1820. But if you have 100 square inches, then you have a little bit of a room to drill the holes in a different way, and you can have a relatively spinny 1820. We can take one example, like the Wilson Shift 99. They had a Shift Pro, and that had 1820 pattern, and it looked quite dense in the string bed, but the ball it produced was very spinny and very launchy. I mean, maybe they talk about this like vertical bending and all this stuff, but it was a very surprising. Like you look at the string bed, you're like, okay, this is gonna play like this. Ball's gonna be missile low, just over the net, and then the ball just shoots out like this, like with a high launch, and that was I remember was like, oh wow, what's going on here?
Yeah, no, yeah, I played with that. I tested that as well as an interesting racket. The vertical bending made me feel like I had a decent backhand, which is interesting. But
You
I
have a
don't know whether
one-handed
it was
backhand.
no two-hand,
Yeah.
two-handed, yeah, two-handed. Unfortunately, I'd love to have a one-hander, but I grew up learning a two-hander, so I'm not brave enough to try and switch to a one-hander at this point in my life, if I'm being honest. So you're talking about the drilling, right? So I've heard is it parallel drilling? Is that what some of the is it called parallel
Yeah,
drilling?
well, that's something they try to do. I mean, Wilson famously used that as marketing, right? Like, I mean, it wasn't only marketing; they did parallel drilling, but it was one of the technologies pushed from 2015. But Head also does it. I mean, like, I think they all do it, depending on the racket. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm assuming that's supposed to help, right, in terms of the spacing. Then I'm assuming the parallel drilling and also make it more consistent.
Yeah, exactly. That the idea is there, and I think some pros like swear by it. Like, I want this drilling. I think there's radial drilling as well. I mean, there's different technologies there if you really want to get like super nerdy about it, but maybe not so for some average club player to think it's too much about the drilling of the holes. I think that there's an issue with the over information when you almost like know too much, you start overthinking because tennis is a game where you have to hit the ball in a place, so you don't want to too many thoughts in your head of why the ball might not have gone there or how you can play better, because like it's all about footwork and our physical abilities and stuff like that. The racket is a fun thing to think about and to tinker with. We do it in other sports like golf, like, oh, I should get a better driver, like I cannot hit my first shot with this one. So I think that it can easily get like overload in the information when the least, sometimes the less you know, the better. Like you just have the three rackets and you're playing and you're like, well, what should I care about the racket?
Yeah. No, I agree. Sometimes actually when I get the demo because I don't actually check anything to do with the rackets before I test them. If I've already seen stuff, then it's different. But I already have some knowledge, but I don't do any extended research, and I'll just test them and then get my own perceptions. And sometimes I'll then look and say, "Oh, that's completely different to what actually I got from the rackets." As you said at the start, it's very personal, right, in terms of the racket and like testing it, etc. And which is why demoing is so important. So yeah, definitely agree with that. Jonas, like, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. As well, great to have you on, and hopefully we can catch up again. Is there anything you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's pretty good. I mean, like I think the good advice there in the end is not to overthink rackets, but it's good to be a bit aware what's out there and to demo and try if you're unsure. But my main advice usually is to start with what you have and maybe consider customizing that, like adding a bit of tungsten tape or something if you want more power or stability, or tinkering with the string, like change the string, start by lowering the tension maybe, and but then you can also change the string. There's so many strings and it's a cheaper way of tweaking than like buying new rackets. So I mean, it's very easy to start buying new rackets. You buy and sell and you get into my lifestyle. But I think like you start with the string and you're gonna see you can get a big difference from your racket with the right string and the right tension. So that would be a good advice, I think, to end off.
Yeah, no, 100% agreed. Thank you, Jonas. Appreciate it, guys. If you haven't already, go and check out Tennisnerd, which I'm sure you have, and go and like and subscribe there. And also the website. I've also done some pieces as well on articles on the website, so you check those out as well if you want.
Yeah, those are great.
Appreciate
So
it.
yeah, for sure, check those out.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Stay safe. We'll see you on the next podcast.